You said that there were many beings that we would not recognize on Jerusalem.
On Jerusalem,
But
right.
how many there are here that we can
We'll recognize more. We'll recognize Seraphim, Adam, Melchizedek. Most of the time, I think. Lananandex. We won't recognize solitary messengers there. We won't recognize them till we get all the way into Havana. It's up there that we'll study Mota. And Mota is not just a super philosophy. Mota has a different value. Mota is more than a superior philosophy. It is to philosophy as two eyes are to one. It has a stereoscopic effect on meanings and values. Material man sees the universe, as it were, with but one eye, flat. Mansion world students achieve cosmic perspective, depth, by superimposing the perceptions of the Marancha life upon the perceptions of the physical life. And they are enabled to bring these material and Maranchal viewpoints into true focus, largely through the untiring ministry of their seraphic counselors, who so patiently teach the Mansion world students and the Marancha progressors. We'll fraternize with the recorder teachers up there. These angels are all in the chain of recorders extending from the lost to the highest custodians of the facts of time and the truths of eternity. Someday they will teach you to seek truth as well as fact, to expand your soul as well as your mind. Even now you should learn to water the garden of your heart as well as to seek for the dry sands of knowledge. Forms are valueless when lessons are learned. No chick may be had without the shell, and no shell is of any worth after the chick is hatched. But sometimes error is so great that its rectification by revelation would be fatal to those slowly emerging truths which are essential to its experiential overthrow. When children have their ideals, do not dislodge them. Let them grow. And while you're learning to think as men, you should also be learning to pray as children. Law is life itself, and not the rules of its conduct. Evil is a transgression of law, not a violation of the rules of conduct pertaining to life, which is the law. Falsehood is not a matter of narration technique, but something premeditated as a perversion of truth. The creation of new pictures out of old facts, the restatement of parental life and the lives of offspring, these are the artistic triumphs of truth. The shadow of the hair's turning, premeditated for an untrue purpose, the slightest twisting or perversion of that which is principle, these constitute falseness. But the fetish of factualized truth, fossilized truth, the iron band of so-called unchanging truth, holds one blindly in a closed circle of cold fact. One can be technically right as to fact and everlastingly wrong in the truth. And that's well illustrated by one of the 28 philosophic illustrations of Marancha Mota. The argumentative defense of any proposition is inversely proportional to the truth contained. The large core of all orders of the transition seraphim is held in the first mansion world, next to the destiny guardians. These transition ministers draw the nearest to humans of all orders of seraphim. I love this sentence here. Angels take delight in service, and when unassigned, often minister as volunteers. They're friendly. The soul of many an ascending mortal has for the first time been kindled by the divine fire of the will to service through personal friendship with the volunteer servers of the seraphic reserves. From them you will learn to let pressure develop, stability, and certainty, to be faithful and earnest and withal cheerful, to accept challenges without complaint, and to face difficulties and uncertainties without fear. They will ask, if you fail, will you rise indomitably to try anew? If you succeed, will you maintain a well-balanced poise, a stabilized and spiritualized attitude throughout every long effort in the long struggle to break the fetters of material inertia, to attain the freedom of spirit existence. Even as mortals, so have these angels been father to many disappointments. And they will point out that sometimes your most disappointing disappointments have become your greatest blessings. Sometimes the planting of a seed necessitates its death, the death of your fondest hopes, before it can be reborn to bear the fruits of new life and opportunity. And from them, you will learn to suffer less through sorrow and disappointment. First by making fewer personal plans concerning other personalities, and then by accepting your lot when you have faithfully performed your duty. You know, in the words of the Old Testament, these should be graven on the palms of our hands.
There's fewer personal plans concerning other personalities. That thing, I think,
Isn't
gets
it
more
true?
people get into the hole than anything else.
This sounds so good we ought to jump right off a cliff.
Yes. Well, you know, to me it's intriguing. It's in connection with this early group of ministers that they tell so much that is so helpful in this life. You will learn that you increase your burdens and decrease the likelihood of success by taking yourself too seriously. Nothing can take precedence over the work of your status sphere, this world or the next. Very important is the work of preparation for the next higher sphere, but nothing equals the importance of the work of the world in which you are actually living. But though the work is important, the self is not. When you feel important, you lose energy to the wear and tear of ego dignity, so that there is little energy left to do the work. Self-importance, not work importance, exhausts immature creatures. It is the self-element that exhausts, not the effort to achieve. You can do important work if you do not become self-important. You can do several things as easily as one if you leave yourself out. Variety is restful. Monotony is what wears and exhausts. Day after day is alike, just life, or the alternative of death.
Hallelujah.
Isn't that tremendous?
Marvelous.
Then it would behoove us to first learn how to live here before we try to master everything in the next universes.
Can you imagine a tadpole who is sulking over in one corner of the water, concentrating on living as a frog? This would be the most useless tadpole on the face of the earth. I am a man, and I'm very interested in doing the best job I can living as a man, not a Moranchian.
That rather discredits the Hindus that sit
Yes,
outside themselves.
of course it does. It discredits the whole monastic concept. The whole monastic concept. Buddha's teaching may lead to monasticism in the concept of the arat, but Buddha's life contains much more truth and presents as the other ideal in Buddhism, the bodhisattva, the one who serves, not the one who meditates. And then on the next page you can go to school if you want to. They've given us half of the text of a lesson. They teach Morancha Mota up there by the parallel technique. They put down citations of human philosophy and then the Mota equivalents. And they've given us half of the blackboard chalk talk of some teacher up there in these 28 philosophic illustrations of Morancha Mota. We still can perceive as we now perceive. We never lose this. You don't have to explain a sunset to a finaliter. He gets just as much out of that sunset as he did when he was a mortal among men. A divine counselor doesn't perceive a sunset. He never was human. So as Moranchians, we now have two levels of perception. We retain everything we have here, and we add to it Morancha perception. And now we're looking at reality from two levels, like two eyes instead of one eye. Mota has a stereoscopic depth perception into meanings, which no human being can have because we're one-eyed perceivers, just physical perception. All these activities of the Morontian spirit world are real. To spirit beings, the spirit world is a reality. To us, the material world is the more unreal. The higher forms of spirits pass freely through ordinary matter. High spirits are reactive to nothing material excepting certain of the basic energies. To material beings, the spirit world is more or less unreal. To spirit beings, the material world is almost entirely unreal, being merely a shadow of the substance of spirit realities. I cannot, with exclusive spirit vision, perceive the building in which this narrative is being translated and recorded. A divine counselor from Uversa, who chances to stand by my side, perceives still less of these purely material creations. This would be the differential of spirit level between the local universe and the super-universe. We discern how these material structures appear to you by viewing a spirit counterpart presented to our minds by one of our attending energy transformers. This material being is not exactly real to me, a spirit being, but it is of course very real and very serviceable to material mortals. There are certain types of beings who are capable of discerning the reality of the creatures of both the spirit and the material worlds. Belonging to this class are the so-called fourth creatures of the Havonocervitals and the fourth creatures of the conciliators. The angels of time and space are endowed with the ability to discern both spirit and material beings, as also are the ascending mortals, subsequent to deliverance from the life in the flesh. After attainment of the higher spirit levels, the ascenders are able to recognize material, Morontia, and spirit realities. There is also here with me a mighty messenger from Uversa, an ascendant adjuster-fused one-time mortal being, and he perceives you as you are. And at the same time he visualizes the solitary messenger, the Supernaphim, and other celestial beings present. Never in your long ascendancy will you lose the power to recognize your associates of former existences. Always, as you ascend inward in the scale of life, will you retain the ability to recognize and fraternize with the fellow beings of your previous and lower levels of experience. Each new translation or resurrection will add one more group of spirit beings to your vision range, without in the least depriving you of the ability to recognize your friends and fellows of former states. That's very comforting to me. In these Morontia motive citations, there are some that appeal more to one than to others. May I read you the ones that I like the best?
Yes, please. 556.
Few persons live up to the faith which they really have. Unreasoned fear is a master intellectual fraud practiced upon the evolving mortal soul.
What number?
2. 5. Difficulties may challenge mediocrity and defeat the fearful, but they only stimulate the true children of the Most High. To enjoy privilege without abuse, to have liberty without license, to possess power, and steadfastly refuse to use it for self-aggrandizement. These are the marks of high civilization. Blind and unforeseen accidents do not occur in the cosmos. Neither do the celestial beings assist the lower being who refuses to act upon his light of truth. Effort does not always produce joy, but there is no happiness without intelligent effort. The weak indulge in resolutions, but the strong act. Life is but a day's work. Do it well. The act is ours. The consequence is God's. The greatest affliction of the cosmos is never to have been afflicted. Mortals only learn wisdom by experiencing tribulation. Stars are best discerned from the lonely isolation of experiential depths, not from the illuminated and ecstatic mountaintops. You cannot perceive spiritual truth until you feelingly experience it. And many truths are not really felt, except in adversity. Impatience is a spirit poison. Anger is like a stone hurled into a hornet's nest. Only a poet can discern poetry in the commonplace prose of routine existence. The evolving soul is not made divine by what it does, but by what it strives to do. Death added nothing to the intellectual possession or to the spiritual endowment, but it did add to the experiential status, the consciousness of survival. The destiny of eternity is determined moment by moment by the achievements of the day-by-day living. The acts of today are the destiny of tomorrow. The argumentative defense of any proposition is inversely proportional to the truth contained. This is all taking place up here on Jerusalem, on the mansion worlds. I think this takes quite a while to get to Jerusalem. I thought about it. How long would you want to spend on these mansion worlds, just voluntarily? I think I'd like to spend 100 years or so, at least. Maybe 1,000 years. I'd like to spend 10,000 years on Jerusalem. There's so much to learn. There's a whole great system to explore, to visit, to grow, to learn. Such fascinating things going on up there. Jerusalem itself is a place of such great beauty. Just the physical beauty of the structures. The super universe and the paradise of owner broadcasts are received on Jerusalem in liaison with Salvington and by a technique involving the polar crystal, the sea of glass. In addition to provisions for the reception of these extra Nebadon communications, there are 3 distinct groups of receiving stations. These separate but tricircular groups of stations are adjusted to the reception of broadcasts from the local worlds, from the constellation headquarters, and from the capital of the local universe. And these broadcasts are automatically displayed so as to be discernible by all types of beings present in a central broadcast amphitheater. Of all preoccupations for an ascending mortal on Jerusalem, none is more engaging and engrossing than that of listening in on the never-ending stream of universe space reports. The Jerusalem broadcast receiving station is encircled by an enormous amphitheater, constructed of scintillating materials largely unknown on Urantia, and seating over 5 billion beings, material and Morantia, besides accommodating innumerable spirit personalities. They're not in space, no. It is a favorite diversion for all Jerusalem to spend their leisure at the broadcast station. They are to learn of the welfare and state of the universe. And this is the only planetary activity which is not slowed down during the recession of light. I think when we're settled in light and life and the Morantia temple is here, then I suspect mortals do get some of these broadcasts. And they do learn the system language while they're still alive here on Earth.
What are the purposes of these isolated planets?
There were the 37 planets that threw in their lot with Lucifer at the time of the rebellion. And they're not isolated in terms of God, but they are isolated in terms of these communication circuits, reflectivity circuits, and so forth. And it doesn't make much difference to the people, but it makes an awful lot of difference to the superhuman administrators. Because a lot of things they're used to are dead down here. The circuits are here, but there's no juice flowing.
They're giving extra help to those people, aren't they?
I just think they have to rise to the challenge. For example, super universe administrators down here would be used to having the reflective services of the Seconophim. I think they can bring Seconophim down here, but I'm not so sure that they can do any reflecting down here. That circuit is non-operative here. I think the circuits were restored when Lana Forge took over. They didn't penalize the loyal worlds of the system. They threw the whole system out of circuit. You see, it forced everything to be done by Pony Express. The rebellion couldn't spread by wireless. It could only spread if they sent a messenger. This planet could communicate with Jerusalem, but it had to all be done by Seraphim, by personal message carrying. After the ascension of Jesus, he transferred the divisional headquarters of the archangels in Satania from Jerusalem to Urantia, and they brought their circuit with them. So we do have a communication line out of this planet now.
Could it be like carrier pigeon?
Yeah, They like carrier pigeons, exactly, yes. The wires are down, we'll send pigeons.
What would happen if the Lucifer rebellion was adjudicated tomorrow, let's say, and the Most High's
I don't think we
took us
would,
back in?
I don't think we would know any different. But starting with secondary and midwares on up, it would make a tremendous difference to this world. It wouldn't make any difference to human beings. Our narrative of these residential and administrative areas takes no account of the vast and beautiful estates of the material sons of God, the permanent citizens of Jerusalem. Neither do we mention numerous other fascinating orders of spirit and near-spirit creatures. For example, Jerusalem enjoys the efficient services of the Spiranga of Design for System Function. These beings are devoted to spiritual ministry in behalf of the supernatural residents and visitors. They are a wonderful group of intelligent and beautiful beings who are the transition servants of the higher Morancha creatures and of the Morancha helpers who labor for the upkeep and embellishment of all Morancha creations. They are on Jerusalem what the Midway creatures are on Urantia. Midway helpers functioning between the material and the spiritual. The system capitals are unique in that they are the only worlds which exhibit well-nigh perfectly all three phases of universe existence: the material, the Morantial, and the spiritual. Whether you are a material, Morantia, or spirit personality, you will feel at home on Jerusalem, as so also do the combined beings, such as the Midway creatures and the material sons. Jerusalem has great buildings of both material and Morantia types, while the embellishment of the purely spiritual zones is no less exquisite and replete. If I only had words to tell you of the Morantia counterparts of the marvelous physical equipment of Jerusalem, if I could only go on to portray the sublime grandeur and exquisite perfection of the spiritual appointments of this headquarters world, your most imaginative concept of perfection of beauty and repleteness of appointment would hardly approach these grandeurs. And Jerusalem is but the first step on the way to the supernal perfection of paradise beauty. On Jerusalem, there are many circles, and it's an interesting concept of structure. They're concentric circles, 7, and the highest, they're devoted to certain orders of beings, like the sons of God, the angels, and always the higher orders are in the lower, centermost circles, observable by the lower orders, who thus enjoy privacy as concerns being observed by their seniors, so that the lowest order admissible to live there. These are apartment houses, so to speak. The lowest orders are in the highest level, at the periphery, and the highest orders are centermost in the lower levels. The circles of the phonelators. These circles have a unique structure at the center, and this same vacant temple is found on every system headquarters world throughout Nebadad. This edifice on Jerusalem is sealed with the insignia of Michael, and it bears this inscription: undedicated to the 7th stage of spirit, to the eternal assignment. Gabriel placed the seal on this temple of mystery, and none but Michael can or may break the seal of sovereignty affixed by the bright and morning star. Someday you shall look upon this silent temple, even though you may not penetrate its mystery. I think we've pretty well covered Bud's adventures on Jerusalem. In other words, we have now taken the first step in the paradise career, which is the 7 mansion worlds and Jerusalem. Not everybody goes through these 7 mansion worlds. Some people from rather advanced spheres wake up on Jerusalem, and then they have to go back and get the mansion world experience as teachers. At least this would be true as long as the mansion worlds continue to function as mansion worlds. Of course, when the whole system is settled in light and life, and when everybody wakes up on Jerusalem, then these mansion worlds will be devoted to other purposes. And then I think we'll understand why they are the satellites of the Phonelators world. Well, visualize Jerusalem itself. Jerusalem is about 100 times the size of this world, but without proportional gravity, because it's a made-to-order world and they can build them pretty big without getting them so darn massive, like Jupiter. And encircling Jerusalem are its 7 primary satellites. And encircling each of these satellites are 7 moons, all architectural. And the 7 mansion worlds are the 7 moons of primary satellite number 1, which is a world given over to the Phenoliters.
Well, maybe check it with it, maybe my math isn't right.
And these other clusters of worlds are devoted to other activities, and as we advance through the mansion worlds, we'll get a chance to visit them. So you see, we're primarily concerned with only 8 of the 57 spheres in the Jerusalem cluster, the 7 mansion worlds, and Jerusalem itself.
Oh, you go through those, right?
We visit them, but they're not study worlds. They're worlds in which other activities are going on, and they tell us a little bit about who lives there. One of these clusters of 8 is for the use of seraphim and the like. It's their system headquarters and so on. So, shall we promote Bud to the constellation level? He is moving on to the constellation, and we are moving backward in the book. You know, this story is told in reverse. They start with paradise, and the last thing they talk about in this series is an inhabited world. So we're reading the book backwards. Up on the constellation, it's his principal objective to become socialized.
Page
485 is the start of the paper. And this is a big cluster. This is 771 architectural worlds, constitutes the administrative headquarters of the constellation of Narlashadek. And now we really get introduced to some foreigners, because 99 other local systems are pouring their ascenders into this constellation. In other words, in a constellation, there are 100,000 worlds, and if if our system is a criterion, we've got, say, 60-odd thousand worlds from which ascenders are arriving at constellation headquarters. Some extremely advanced individuals skip the entire system and wake up on the constellation. This is possible in worlds settled in light and life that have been there a long time.
You think they would have fused?
Yeah, some would. You see, when a world is long settled in light and life, death becomes decreasingly frequent. A higher and higher percentage of the mortals fuse during life. And I can imagine that the final stronghold of snobbery could be exemplified by a discussion in a family. You know, Kathy is very interested in that Jones boy. And Mama says, well, I don't know about the Joneses, you know, they die. This would be a sort of a stigma, to have too many deaths in the family. You know, what's with you people? Because the author of that paper says that he has visited no world from which death has disappeared. But he has visited worlds on which death is getting reasonably rare. I think in many ways a world like ours is a pretty good world, because we are up against coercive pressure. We are forced to make decisions. This is a pressure planet. And there are many advantages, I believe, to having got hatched out on a world like this. The job we have to do here is to learn how to live with difficult people. And these difficult people are the Univitatia, who are discussed on page 493. Spiritually, they're alike. Intellectually, they vary as we do. In form, they much resemble the Mirage state of existence, and they are created to function in 70 diverse orders of personality. Each of these orders exhibits 10 major variations of intellectual activity, and each of these varying intellectual types presides over the special training in cultural schools of progressive occupational or practical socialization on some one of the 10 satellites which swing around each of the major Edentia worlds. They've got 70 major worlds, and each of those have 10 satellites. That gives you 770, and Edentia is the last of the spheres. In the various, let's see, the physical endowment of Edentia and its surrounding spheres is well nigh perfect. They could hardly equal the spiritual grandeur of the spheres of Salvington, but they far surpass the glories of the training worlds of Jerusalem. The time spent on the 70 training worlds of transition Morantia culture, associated with the Edentia age of mortal ascension, is the most settled period of an ascending mortal's career up to the status of a finaliter. This is really the typical Morantia life. It's the mid-phase. You see, on Jerusalem, you're more physical. On Salvington, you are more spiritual. But here you are a true Morantian. While you are rekeyed each time you pass from one major cultural world to another, you retain the same Morantia body, and there are no periods of personality unconsciousness. Your sojourn on Edentia and its associated spheres will be chiefly occupied with the mastery of group ethics, the secret of pleasant and profitable interrelationships between the various universe and super-universe orders of intelligent personalities. On the mansion worlds, you completed the unification of the evolving mortal personality. On the system capital, you attained Jerusalem citizenship and achieved the willingness to submit the self to the disciplines of group activities and coordinated undertakings. But now, in the constellation training worlds, you are to achieve the real socialization of your evolving Morantia personality. This supernal cultural requirement consists in learning how to, first, live happily and work effectively with 10 diverse fellow Morantians, while 10 such groups are associated in companies of 100 and then federated in corps of 1,000. 2. Abide joyfully and cooperate heartily with 10 Univitatia, who, though similar intellectually to Morantia beings, are very different in every other way. And then must you function with this group of 10 as it coordinates with 10 other families, which are in turn confederated into a corps of 1,000 Univitatia. 3. Achieve simultaneous adjustment to both fellow Morantians and these host Univitatia. Acquire the ability voluntarily and effectively to cooperate with your own order of beings in close working association with a somewhat dissimilar group of intelligent beings. 4. While thus socially functioning with beings like and unlike yourself, achieve intellectual harmony with and make vocational adjustment to both groups of associates. 5. While attaining satisfactory socialization of the personality on intellectual and vocational levels, further perfect the ability to live in intimate contact with similar and slightly dissimilar beings with ever-lessening irritability and ever-diminishing resentment. And that means that we are still irritable and we can still hold resentment. The reversion directors contribute much to the latter attainment through their group play activities. 6. Adjust all of these various socialization techniques to the furtherance of the progressive coordination of the Paradise Ascension career. Augment universe insight by enhancing the ability to grasp the eternal goal meanings concealed within these seemingly insignificant time-space activities. 7. And then climax all of these procedures of multi-socialization with the concurrent enhancement of spiritual insight as it pertains to the augmentation of all phases of personal endowment through group spiritual association and Morantia coordination. Intellectually, socially, and spiritually, two moral creatures do not merely double their personal potentials of universe achievement by partnership technique. They more nearly quadruple their attainment and accomplishment possibilities. I think an organization is, to the, you might say, tissue of religion, what one's skeleton is to one's body. Do you ever stop and think how unpleasant a skeleton is if it shows? And how useless any of us would be without that bone structure. But the place for the skeleton is on the inside, not the outside. The more an organization shows, the uglier it is. The more invisible it is, the more valuable it is. That's my own feeling about an organization. We might take a look at what they say about Edentia. The system capitals are particularly beautified with material and mineral constructions, while the universe headquarters is more reflective of spiritual glory. But the capitals of the constellations are the acme of Morancha activities and living embellishments. On the constellation headquarters worlds, living embellishment is more generally utilized. And it is this preponderance of life, botanic artistry, that causes these worlds to be called the gardens of God. The architectural worlds enjoy 10 forms of life of the material order. On Urantia there is plant and animal life, but on such a world as Edentia there are 10 divisions of the material orders of life. Were you to view these 10 divisions of Edentia life, you would quickly classify the first 3 as vegetable and the last 3 as animal, but you would be utterly unable to comprehend the nature of the intervening 4 groups of prolific and fascinating forms of life. Even the distinctly animal life is very different from that of the evolutionary worlds, so different that it is quite impossible to portray to mortal minds the unique character and affectionate nature of these non-speaking creatures. There are tens upon thousands of living creatures which your imagination could not possibly picture. The whole animal creation is of an entirely different order from the gross animal species of the evolutionary worlds. But all this animal life is most intelligent and exquisitely serviceable, and all the various species are surprisingly gentle and touchingly companionable. There are no carnivorous creatures on such architectural worlds. There is nothing in all Edentia to make any living being afraid. The vegetable life is also very different from that of Urantia, consisting of both material and Morancha varieties. The material growths have a characteristic green coloration, but the Morancha equivalents of vegetative life have a violet or orchid tinge of varying hue and reflection. Such Morancha vegetation is purely an energy growth. When eaten, there is no residual portion. Being endowed with 10 divisions of physical life, not to mention the Morancha variations, these architectural worlds provide tremendous possibilities for the biologic beautification of the landscape and of the material and the Morancha structures. The celestial artisans direct the native spornegia in this extensive work of botanic decoration and biologic embellishment, whereas your artists must resort to inert paint and lifeless marble to portray their concepts. The celestial artisans and the Univitatia more frequently utilize living materials to represent their ideas and to capture their ideals. If you enjoy the flowers, shrubs, and trees of Urantia, then will you feast your eyes upon the botanical beauty and the floral grandeur of the supernal gardens of Edentia, but it is beyond my powers of description to undertake to convey to the mortal mind an adequate concept of these beauties of the heavenly worlds. Truly, eye has not seen such glories as await your arrival on these worlds of the mortal ascension adventure.
So hard to imagine that without weeds and bugs and all of
Yes.
the pike in our gardens.
I think this is why they associate the paper on the celestial artisans with a constellation. Because, as I look at it, art form, as we visualize it, would be at its peak at the constellation level. And if you'll recall, they try to describe what these celestial artisans are like, and they simply run out of gas. Celestial musicians, heavenly reproducers, divine builders, thought recorders, energy manipulators, designers and embellishers, harmony workers. It was in that paper we read the section about the fact that material reality just isn't real to a spiritual being who was created as such. It says here, the best of music of Urantia is just a fleeting echo of the magnificent strains heard by the celestial associates of your musicians, who left but snatches of these harmonies of Morancha forces on record as the musical melodies of sound harmonics. Well, you have assembled some beautiful melodies on Urantia. You have not progressed musically nearly so far as many of your neighboring planets in Satania. If Adam and Eve had only survived, then would you have had music in reality. But the gift of harmony, so large in their natures, has been so diluted by strains of unmusical tendencies that only once in 1,000 mortal lives is there any great appreciation of harmonics. But be not discouraged. Someday a real musician may appear on your rancho, and whole peoples will be enthralled with the magnificent strains of his melodies. One such human being could forever change the course of a whole nation, even the entire civilized world. It is literally true. Melody has power a whole world to transform. Forever, music will remain the universal language of men, angels, and spirits. Harmony is the speech of Havona. Each superuniverse has its own language, a tongue spoken by its personalities and prevailing throughout its sectors. This is known as the tongue of Uversa in our superuniverse. Each local universe also has its own language. I'm on 503. All of the higher orders of Nebadon are bilingual, speaking both the language of Nebadon and the tongue of Uversa. When two individuals from different local universes meet, they communicate in the tongue of Uversa. If, however, one of them hails from another superuniverse, they must have recourse to a translator. In the central universe, there is little need of a language. There exists perfect and well-nigh complete understanding. There only the gods are not fully comprehended. We are taught that a chance meeting on paradise reveals more of mutual understanding than could be communicated by a mortal language in 1,000 years. Even on Salvington we know as we are known. Page 483. Mind is always creative. The mind endowment of an individual animal, Morantian, mortal, spirit ascender, or finality attainer is always competent to produce a suitable and serviceable body for the living creature identity. But the presence phenomenon of a personality or the pattern of an identity as such is not a manifestation of energy, either physical, mindful, or spiritual. The personality form is the pattern aspect of a living being. It connotes the arrangement of energies, and this plus life and motion is the mechanism of creature existence. On the material world, you think of a body as having a spirit, but we regard the spirit as having a body. The materialized are truly the windows of the spirit-born soul. The spirit is the architect, the mind is the builder, the body is the material building. The liaison of the cosmic mind and the ministry of the adjutant mind spirits evolve a suitable physical tabernacle for the evolving human being. Likewise does the Morantia mind individualize the Morantia form for all mortal survivors. As the mortal body is personal and characteristic for every human being, so will the Morantia form be highly individual and adequately characteristic of the creative mind which dominates it. No two Morantia forms are any more alike than any two human bodies. The Morantia power supervisor, sponsor, and the attending seraphim provide the undifferentiated Morantia material wherewith the Morantia life can begin to work. And after the Morantia life, it will be found that spirit forms are equally diverse, personal, and characteristic of their respective spirit mind indwellers. Now, here I think is one of the real incentives to progress. You see, if you're ugly on the inside up there, your body is much more flexible, and you'll turn ugly on the outside. And the only Helena Rubinstein you can visit to improve your appearance would be to make a stronger spiritual effort to do the will of the Father. Their beauty would correlate with goodness. And I fancy the higher you go, the more respective, the more responsive these patterns would become to the innards of us. The trouble with life down here is that too much of it's like the picture of Dorian Gray. We don't write deeply enough our character in our faces. How long we stay there? but long enough, I think, to get full satisfaction in success. And then one day, our psychology does a flip. We get itchy feet. All of a sudden, these horizons, instead of being comfortingly stationary, begin to look small. We begin to wonder what's on the other side of the mountains. And this is probably the indication that it's time for us to move on to the constellation level. Below us, which can know God. And yet he's given us a part of himself, something which I would expect him to do to folks that were way up topside. And yet he doesn't indwell them. He doesn't even indwell our near of kin unless they've done time, so to speak. The atoms usually have to serve on a world. The